today's session. How are you doing? I pray that all is well with you and your families at this time. So today we're moving on to the 17th day of the Purushotam Maas challenge, and we're on the 3-sloki Gita, starting on verse 16 today, 16, 17, 18. This is the essence, the 3-sloki Gita, the essence of the whole Bhagavad Gita in 3 verses. We know the Chatur-sloki Gita comes in the 10th chapter, 10.8, 9, 10, 11. And this is the 3-sloki Gita. So we've been learning so far about the upside down banyan tree and how this Jnani is trying to get out of it. And then we saw how the transmigration of the soul, the subtle body moves from one body to the other. And then we've been seeing how Krishna is helping by his mercy. He gives light of the sun, which keeps us alive, moonlight, which gives taste to the plants, it creates enjoyment for us. And then he's also Visvanara, the fire of digestion in the stomach. And then we've been seeing how that the goal of all the Vedas is to know him yesterday. Sarvaschaham Hridi Sannivisto Matta Smitir Jnanam Apohanamscha Vedascha Sarver Aham Eva Vedyo. The goal of the Vedas is to know me. So now, having understood that, Arjuna is hearing this information and he's thinking, so what is the essence of the Vedas then? What is that goal? What is the essence? Can you summarize the whole Vedic knowledge? So Krishna does that in the next 3 verses. That's why it's called 3-sloki Gita. Remember, Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all the Upanishads. Sarvopanishada Gao Dugdha Gopalanandana Partha Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdha Gita Amritam Mahat. That the essence of all the Upanishads, Sarva Upanishada Gao, the essence of all the Upanishads is this Gita Amrita, this nectar that's coming in the Bhagavad Gita. And now the essence of the Bhagavad Gita from all the Vedas is this 3 slokas. So let's see this. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, text number 16. Dvavimo Purusho Loke Ksharas Chakshara Evacha Kshara Sarvani Bhutani Kutasto Kshara Uchyate. Translation: there are 2 classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. So let's go over the translation again. So translation: there are 2 classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. So this section that we're hearing about is the most powerful, irrefutable section of the whole Gita that defeats Mayavad philosophy, that we are one with God, that in our perfected state we merge into the light, we merge into the oneness, we merge into the energy and become one with God. These 3 verses here coming up is the most powerful, irrefutable. It's right there, clear as day and night. So many times Prabhupada say, Krishna is speaking, let him speak. Why are you trying to interpret his words? Because this is what the Mayavadis do. They interpret or misinterpret, give it a spin. They misinterpret the words because they know Sanskrit very well. They misinterpret and create a new meaning that suits their doctrine. But Prabhupada is saying Krishna is speaking. If he's saying Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo, it means Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo. It means I am the source of everything. It's not some other energy within the body of Krishna, within the light that's speaking And no, he's saying directly, I am the source of everything. So Prabhupada the translation is explaining here there are two kinds of beings, right? So one is fallible and the other is infallible. So it's describing, first we heard about, earlier on in the Gita, we heard about Prakriti and Para-Prakriti. Two types of natures here. One is Prakriti, the material nature, and then there's a superior nature to that, which is the living entity. So now we're hearing there's two types of living entities. One is fallible, means he's conditioned in this world. And the other one is infallible, means he's liberated. So clearly there's two types. One is conditioned, one is liberated. So what this 3-sloki Gita goes on to explain is that there is a third type of being, which is the Purushotam, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if there's three kinds of beings, where does it say that they merge and become one? There's the conditioned, and the conditioned there is the liberated, and then there is the third type, but that will come to tomorrow. And that third being is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So at no time do they merge and become one. There are three distinct living entities. So Prabhupada goes on in the purport. As already explained, the Lord in his incarnation as Vyasadeva compiled the Vedanta Sutra. Here the Lord is giving in summary the comments of the Vedanta Sutra. He says, the living entities who are innumerable can be divided into two classes, the fallible and the infallible. So this information we're getting from Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Sutra. Veda Anta means the conclusion, the end of the Vedic knowledge, and it's in sutra form, which means it's an aphorism, short sayings. So you got to know how to understand those sayings. Here, this is not in sutra form. Krishna is speaking directly. He is saying, Aham sarvasya prabhavo, matta sarvam pravatyate, everything emanates from me. Directly he is speaking. There's no interpretation or sutras here. But this is how the Vedanta, the Upanishads and the Vedanta Sutra is written. So from that we hear about this, that there are two types of entities, the fallible and infallible. Prabhupada goes on to say, the living entities are eternally separated parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada is saying this, eternally separated. Where did we hear this? In 15.7. Mam evamsa jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manashastani indriyani prakatistani karshati. So Krishna is saying that the mam eva amsa jiva loke, the jiva is amsa, part, eva amsa, part and parcel. Mam eva amsa, part and parcel of me. Part and parcel means it's connected to God, but how? Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. Jiva Bhuta, those living entities which are the Jivas, Sanatana. Sanatana. Sanatana means eternally. They are eternally parts and parcels. They never merge. They never join and merge into the light and become one with the light or one with the energy or one with the force of God. They Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. They eternally. Manashastani indriyani prakatistani karshati. And they are struggling with the senses and which includes the mind. When they are in contact with the material world, they are called Jiva Bhuta. And the Sanskrit words given here, Kshara Sarvani Bhutani, means that they are fallible. So we can see this Kshara Sarvani Bhutani, that they are fallible, that they are prone to be conditioned here. So Prabhupada is describing here those that are Kshara, those two types of Kshara and Akshara, those that are conditioned, those that are infallible or liberated. So these two type of beings are here. But in tomorrow's verse we'll hear how that there's a third type of being, which is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there is distinct categories. There's no such thing as merging. Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, they eternally parts and parcels. So at the moment, Prabhupada is describing the conditioned soul. Kshara. Kshara Sarvani Bhutani. Those souls that are conditioned or fallible. Prabhupada goes on to say, those who are in oneness with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here he says, those who are in oneness. So that oneness doesn't mean you one with merging into. Just like a company, they are in one with the CFO or the CEO of the company. They are in one with his desire and what he wants for the company. So does that mean that they are also the CEO? No. Their mood, their spirit is one. So here as well, we are one with the Lord, but in qualities. Quantitatively, we're different. And we know that comes Nityo Nityanam, Chetanas Chetananam, Eko Bahunam Jo Vitadadi Kaman. Both are Nitya, Nityanam, both are eternal. And Chetanas, both are conscious. Chetanas Chetananam. But what's the difference with the both? Eko, one, Bahunam Jo Vitadadi Kaman. One is taking care of the other. One is dependent on the other. This is the same point Prabhupada is making here. Prabhupada goes on to say, those who are in oneness with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, are called infallible. Oneness does not mean that there are no individuality, but there is no disunity. So those who are one with the Lord, they are liberated. But that oneness, like I'm explaining, is not one with God. It's one with the mood of God, one with the Spirit of God, one with his intentions, his desires. So we never merge, we eternally, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. He says we eternally parts separated. Otherwise, think about it logically, how is their service and how is their love if everything becomes one? You're going to love yourself? You're going to serve yourself? So how is the devotional service? Devotional service is the thing that's helping the jnani. That is the alternative to the jnani's practice. Then if you're going to merge, then what's the use? Because you're going to merge anyway. If you merge, then what's the use doing any sadhana right now? Any practice right now? But love, it can only exist between two separate entities. You cannot have love with one entity. It has to have two separate living conscious entities. Both entities have to be eternal and have to be conscious. Nitya and Chaitanas. Prabhupada goes on to say, they are all agreeable to the purpose of the creation. You see, just like Prabhupada is saying, they are all agreeable with what's the purpose of the creation. Just like that in a company, everybody is agreeable with the CEO. His desire drives the company. So Prabhupada goes on to say, of course, in the spiritual world, there is no such thing as creation. But since the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as stated in the Vedanta Sutra, is sum of all emanations, that conception is explained. So he's giving the explanation that seeing that the Lord is the Lord of creation, Purushottama, Uttama Purusha, Supreme Person. Purusha means person and Uttama means topmost. So Purushottama, the topmost person. So this is his creation. So if we don't work with creation, we don't align ourselves with creation, we're working against him. And that's what we're doing in this world right now. Nobody knows what God wants. Nobody knows how the world operates. We're just doing our own thing, not following any dharma or religiosity. And we expect everything to be fine. And whenever we need something, we just go and pray to the temple and he gives. So he's giving out of his kindness, but we don't realize there's a bigger plan for creation. And we are part of that plan. So Prabhupada goes on to say, according to the statement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, there are two classes of living entities. The Vedas give evidence of this. So there is no doubt about this. So from the Vedas we hear that there's two separate classes that we've been discussing so far. Prabhupada goes on to say, the living entities who are struggling in this world with the mind and the five senses have their material bodies which are changing. So where is that coming from? That's coming from 5.7. Manashastani indriyani prakatistani karshati. They're struggling with the five senses. That's Prabhupada directly translating from that sloka. Prabhupada goes on to say, as long as the living entity is conditioned, his body changes due to the contact with matter. So as long as you have contact with matter, your body is going to change. Prabhupada goes on to say, matter is changing. So the living entity appears to be changing, but in the spiritual world, the body is not made of matter. Therefore, there is no change. In the material world, the living entity undergoes 6 changes: birth, growth, duration, reproduction, then dwindling and vanishing. These are the changes of the material body. So Prabhupada is describing the difference between Kshara and Akshara. It's the body that is different. The soul is the same. Soul is same in all living entities. But the body is different. The material conditioned life, it has a material body. Therefore it changes. And it looks like it's changing. And it goes through 6 features. Birth, growth, it reproduces, dwindles, and then it finally decomposes or dies. So the 6 changes of the material body. But those that are infallible, they don't have the same body. They have a spiritual body. So Prabhupada goes on to say, but in the spiritual world, the body does not change. There is no old age, there is no birth, there is no death. There, all existence in oneness. You see, they are all connected to that Sat Chit Ananda, that energy, the spiritual energy. So there is no material contamination, no material body there. It's a spiritual body. It has a different experience there. Prabhupada goes on to say, Kshara Sarvani Bhutani. Any living entity who has come into contact with matter, beginning from the first created being Brahma down to the small ant. And that's Prabhupada's famous quote. From Brahma to Indragop. From Brahma right down to the small ant. Abrahma bhuvana loka punavarjino arjuna mamupetyata kuntaya punajanma navidyate. Right from the top planet, Brahmaloka, right down to the bottom planet, repeated birth and death. Why? Because of this material bodies that they have. Different types of, our body is an earthly material body. Brahma's body is a body made of intelligence. And we see other forms, other creatures of life that have different kinds of bodies. But our body is an earthly makeup of body. So it's just a gathering of matter, some or one of the 5 elements. Bhumi apo nalo vayu, kamano buddhi revacha, ahamkar vimudatma, binnam prakriti astada. Arjuna, earth, water, fire, air, ether. These are all my separated energies. So one of these bodies you can take. But it is conditioned. It all, whether it's an earth body or an intelligence body, it all goes through these 6 phases of the change. But the spiritual body doesn't. Prabhupada goes on to say, it is changing its body. Therefore, they are all fallible. In the spiritual world, however, they are always liberated in oneness. But in the spiritual world, they are liberated there. There is no conditions. There is no conditioning like the material world. So in today's verse, we discussed that there are 2 types of entities. As we going over this 3 Sloki Gita, there's 2 types, Kshara and Akshara. The fallible and the infallible, or the conditioned and the liberated. So tomorrow, we're going to hear, because Arjuna asked for the essence of the Vedanta, so this is deep Vedanta philosophy. So tomorrow we're going to hear about the 3rd living entity, Purushottama, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So thank you very much. Please join us again tomorrow. Hare Krishna.